This four-part series has focused on systemic racism, which describes how discriminatory actions show up in the American educational system, the economic system, the healthcare system, the criminal justice system, and more. And whether we realize it or not, racism is systemic, pervasive, and embedded within the core of many major institutions. I'm being joined by Nina Johnson, who serves as the Senior Vice President, Consumer and Business Banking Lender with U.S. Bank. And we're also being joined by Mike Ward, who serves as the Small Business Leader on U.S. Bank's Consumer and Business Banking team. How are you?
Good.
I appreciate you both being here with us today. And really, I wanted to start off talking about the fact that we know that racism it has reared its ugly head, like I said early on, in many of our institutions. And there is a 2021 Edelman Trust Barometer Special Report, which is an online survey of over 1,500 Americans that has been done that showed that 13% of Black Americans earning $50,000 or less a year report being rejected service entirely, more than double versus white Americans with similar income. And so it was important for me to invite you here today to talk about how U.S. Bank is helping change that narrative. So let's talk about some of the things that you have in place, specifically when it comes to helping build wealth.
So I'd like to just kind of give an overview of a little history that led to what we're doing right now, to your point. In the current market, we're just focusing on a couple of things that address what you just described. One of them is a part of a $116 million infusion of capital to help stave off economic challenges that are happening in communities of color specifically. And that dovetails nicely into the Milwaukee footprint. So when we talk about systemic racism, when we talk about economic issues that are happening in areas that are primarily dominated in areas of color, and then on top of that, we layer in the Community Reinvestment Act, or the CRA template of low to moderate income. We have to look at that holistically and understand that the people that are living in Milwaukee, although they may live in a zip code like 53206, et cetera, there's still opportunities for them to move forward economically, as it pertains to a small business, building that wealth gap that we talk about so often within U.S. Bank. And so we looked at that as a whole and said, okay, how can we really make impact and positively change things? And that's where the access commitment came to fruition, which is the $116 million that I mentioned before. And so when we think about like Mike Ward, who is on my team in the business banking space, he runs small business for people that are in need of reinforcement to start or move their business forward. We've set aside dollars to continue to kind of speak to where that population needs to go as it pertains to like business banking. So I would say that Mike is an expert in that space, and he could probably tell you a little bit more about some of the things that he's doing personally, just grassroots work, going out to nonprofits, talking to aspiring entrepreneurs, and making sure that they have the basic tools needed to have a successfully run business. And that's just not him, but he's kind of training the trainer and teaching his team how to do the same thing. And so, from a community standpoint, as community stakeholders who have been in Wisconsin for many, many years, going back to the first Wisconsin days, we find that it's an opportunity to really change the narrative and put some skin in the game, so to speak, and make a positive impact, not only financially as it pertains to providing, product offerings to help small businesses, but then also we work with nonprofits like Wisconsin Women's Business Initiative Corporation. There's other organizations like that we work alongside just to make sure that we're providing resources and the know-how to get to where we aspire our entrepreneurs to go. But Mike is the expert, not me. I'm just the market leader.
Yeah, and Mike, we actually know that minority-owned businesses definitely help stabilize neighborhoods. So I am very interested in hearing some of the things that you have in place as far as programs and services.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, to Nina's point and yours, Andrea, building black wealth, there's a significant component of that is owning a business, and it's not, equally distributed. Like you said, there's many systematic problems in people of color owning a business and therefore building wealth through that particular channel. It's not the only channel to build wealth, but it's a really critical one. And, at US Bank, we've really tried, particularly in the last decade, to get a lot better at, one, getting into those communities and making sure they realize the services we can offer. But to Nina's point, we're finding that we can't do it alone. And so we're partnering with a variety of community development financial institutions. Nina mentioned WIBIC, which is, critical for us here in Milwaukee, but there's a number of other ones. And there's a lot of components. It's not an easy problem to solve with just a single solution. There's issues around education around credit and credit scores. There's issues around building money for down payments on real estate or acquiring a business. And there's a lot of what they call technical education. But, through programs like the SBA, working with the nonprofit community, we're doing both, reaching out and providing actual dollars. But more importantly, I think we're finding there's a significant component of education and training that we can provide that, builds the next generation of business owners and therefore wealth in that community. And to your point, that takes an entire neighborhood with it because it creates jobs, which create further wealth and hopefully passes on wealth to another generation. So it's all tied together, and it is really important topic right now.
Yeah, it really is. And when we really look at, you mentioned WIBIC, which is Wisconsin Women's Business Initiative Corporation, they really help people where they are as far as having that business plan and all of these different things, which are the first steps in wanting to be a small business owner. So partnering and really coming together with these other organizations really does help distribute the education that is needed in helping people understand every step that needs to be taken to be a successful business owner, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
What I'd like to look at this point, when it comes to building black wealth, U.S. Bank conducted a survey of approximately 4,600 people to better understand the wealth management needs of various populations. Can you speak on what you felt some of those major needs were?
Sure, I can speak on that because I was part of that population that was surveyed by our vice chair, actually, of wealth management. So from that perspective, our vice chair wanted to understand, and she, by the way, wanted to understand why there was a gap, a substantial gap between people of color and majority populations. And so we spent, and I'm saying we because there were several leaders of color that came on a national call, and we just started rattling off our own experiences. And she's a really in-tuned leader, so she was gathering that data so that she could create a program with her leadership team, which is our Black Wealth Initiative today. But some of the things that I personally shared with her was, the testimonial of my first home, building or buying my first home, building my first home, looking at, savings, using a 401k plan to act as a mode of savings early on at 18 years of age, and just giving those experiences to her so she can understand my story, which may not necessarily be your story, but it was something that she was not aware of. And so she pulled all that information together and said, okay, we need to create something that addresses all of these issues that are happening in communities of color. Because she comes from humble means, so she can relate herself as a person who comes from another country and started grassroots to make her own way in the world. And so, and her name is Gunjan Kidia. So just to think about your vice chairman coming to you and saying, okay, tell me your story. How did you get to where you are right now? And there's true listening happening. There's real communication happening, right? And through that, a program is birthed. And that is the component of access that taps into Black wealth.
I love that because really it is also U.S. Bank's goal to have those employees who really do show the diversity of where we live, and having those people in those places really does open up the mindset of all of the different scenarios that exist for people of every color and background. So, Mike, is there anything specifically that you want those who are watching to know about U.S. Bank when it comes to small businesses and maybe becoming an entrepreneur?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the biggest thing that is that, we're very interested in helping people beyond just, the concept of opening a checking account or making a loan. We truly are interested in helping build our communities. And so, almost every person on really all of Nina's teams, but in business banking in particular, are deeply involved in, whether it's a minority chamber, an economic development agency, a business improvement district. All of my staff is deeply tied to their communities, and they want to help people think through the process of starting a business, which, shouldn't really start with how do I get a loan. It should really start as, as my personality right to be an entrepreneur? Do I have the training I need? If I built this sort of network of resources around me that will make me successful? Because the last thing we want to do is encourage someone to start a business who's not ready or is ready to fail. That doesn't help them or us or our community. So, the biggest thing I would want people to understand is, there are business trained bankers in every one of our branches throughout the community who are actively involved in our community and ready to be educators as well as bankers, truly advisors to help people succeed in business.
Yes, part of this whole show is really not only talking about the systems that are in place, but really talking to those who are working hard on the ground, trying to make a difference and change that narrative. So U.S. Bank is taking pride in redefining how the bank serves diverse communities and more opportunities for diverse employees. And we thank you so much for taking that step and making a difference right here where we live. Thank you both for your time. Nina Johnson serves as the Senior Vice President Consumer and Business Banking Leader with U.S. Bank, and Mike Ward serves as the Small Business Leader on U.S. Bank's Consumer and Business Banking team. When we return, we'll meet Milwaukee entrepreneur Chad Johnson, and he shares with us the wisdom he's gained as an African-American man navigating the world of small business and finance. His story is next.